Alright, welcome back again. We're going to be making our second chess video here. So, without further ado, let's get into it and search for a rapid game here. And we'll see if we can get into some more theoretical lines here. E4, like we started out normally. Alright, we have e4, e5, a king pawn game, and knight f3, which is where most of my theoretical knowledge lies. And we have d6, which this is a Philidor defense. So how I like to play against the Philidor defense, I mean, there's multiple ways you can do this. You can try to transpose it into a Lopez type system. If black plays knight to f6, I'm going to just play d4 here, which is what most books recommend. And after the exchange, we just have our knight in the middle here. We take back. And the book move from here, I believe, is knight to c6, and then we'll respond with knight to c3 is our book move. And this is just following theory. So we got bishop to d7, and what that could be doing is, if he's setting up, knight to c6, and he wants to exchange these knights here, and without ruining his pawn structure, because he would have to take back with a pawn otherwise. So I think that's good. We can develop our knight to c3 still. And yeah, exactly. He's putting his knight on c6, because in the event of an exchange, he would want to take back with a bishop. This is transposing basically into the main line, which is just a different move order. He played bishop d7 and then knight c6. Normally the move order goes knight c6 and then bishop d7. So from here, if you're familiar with Ruy Lopez's theory, is when you drop back the bishop here, this is a little bit different. You actually want to take with a bishop, because either way, he's going to basically ruin his pawn structure here on the queen side, which is not necessarily bad, but it's like a long-term aspect of the game we have here. So I think normally you want to take with the pawn instead of giving up your bishop, but he takes with a bishop, which is also okay. It's just not necessarily theoretical. And from here, I think probably the simplest way to play this would just be to castle, and then we can focus on development after. So I think let's just play it simple and castle. I don't see any drawbacks to that move. There's no real pressing need to develop our pieces really quickly, because black isn't really significantly developed in this position. So we'll just castle, make sure our king is safe, and see, now a new prospect opens up, I guess, for our bishop, because he plays knight f6. Maybe we want to put our bishop on g5 here, pinning the knight to the queen. Another interesting move we could play is maybe e5 here, but I think it might be a little bit early for a pawn sacrifice. We'll see. We could play rook e1, delaying, I guess, about development of our bishop for one tempo, to see what his plan is here, if he's going to fianchetto or play bishop to e7, and that also sets up the move e5 a little bit better, So I think, I mean, there's multiple ways to play this. I'm going to go with rook to e1 here. All right, bishop to e7 is good. And I think that might signify, it might signal us that it is a good idea to play b3, because after castles, which is like most natural next move for black, we can go bishop to b2 and occupy this strong diagonal against his castled king. So I think that looks very appealing, and that also will free up our queen to move and connect rooks on the next move. There's also the move e5 here that we have to consider, but after takes, we can't really take back. Well, we could, because our queen is still guarded, but that forces our knight to drop back, which I don't think is optimal. So I think b3, by ruling out e5, is probably the better move. We'll continue our plan with bishop to b2 here. And rook e8 is pretty natural, I would say. So now we can look at e5, I think, pretty seriously. Let's see. We have e5, and if we calculate this, e5, pawn takes e5, and then we don't necessarily have to take back yet. We could take the queen. Let's see. I think a better way to play this would probably be a slower approach and go queen e2, eyeing, because again, the main aspect of this game is that he has weaker queenside pawns than we do. Other than that, the position is probably mostly equal, like objectively. And so I think a slower approach where we try to add pressure to the queen side as well as make subtle improving moves is a good approach for this game. So let's play queen e2. h6, so that's just a general, defending move for defense on the king side. I think e5 here might look a little bit better, but I think rook d1 would perfectly set up a move like e5. So let's try rook to d1, rook a to d1 first, and now we have some attacking prospects here. Notice how his rook on this side is kind of fixed to defending this pawn just because it's a weak pawn, and him playing c5 is a response here, but c5 is a little bit weakening because it leaves this outpost for our knight here, as well as if you look at the pawn on c5, it's actually unguarded because this pawn is pinned to the queen. So there we could, knight on the rim is pretty grim. You could flirt with the idea of getting your knight over here to attack this pawn, but it's not like he can't just unpin. So what if we put our knight on d5 and he takes, and we could take with a pawn and establish a pretty good pawn chain. But then after bishop to f6, he's attacking both our bishop and our queen with the rook. So is that good? Probably not. However, I do like the idea of moving this knight in order to open up this diagonal. We could play queen f3 here. It's a decent move. Just getting our queen out of danger and just opening up, more prospects. And we can play e5, and which forces his knight basically to move. I think e5 probably looks most interesting here, because this comes with tempo, and he basically has to move to like h7, maybe back to d7, and we can basically just shove this pawn down his throat. Or we can move like knight to d5 since it's no longer guarded and execute our original plan here. So let's see. We can move d5, take with tempo, and then have a pretty serious attack on this bishop after knight d5. I think that's pretty much winning. I think this is basically like winning. The worst thing that happens is we miscalculate somehow, and he's able to get this pawn, win that pawn, but even then it's not the end of the game if we're somehow blundering. But I don't think this is a blunder. I think this just looks like basically like a GG for our opponent. So can we take? No, not yet, because his rook eyes on our queen, but we could take the pawn because it comes with check. Notice we have a slight issue here. If he is pinning our knight to our bishop there, so we have to keep that in mind. But let's see. Let's calculate this. King takes, check here. I'm going to calculate here, check, takes. I mean, I think that's pretty much winning because he can't, although he can't move our knight, he can't take our knight. So pawn takes f7, comes with check. He basically is forced to take with his king lest he loses a rook. So pawn takes, king takes. Then I'm looking at the move, queen h5, check. He plays g6, blocking that, and then queen takes on h6. And I think that's pretty much GG, if I'm not mistaken, because it's not like it's not like he's winning material. And even if he is, I think this is a very strong attack. Maybe he can go back to, maybe that's something I didn't consider. Yeah. Let's see. All right. So we got, our pieces are a little bit discombobulated here, but let's see if there's a way we can continue our attack. You can go knight d5, but that's sacrifice. I don't think that sacrifice works. Is there a way he can take advantage of the pin? I don't know. But it is a bit annoying to have this pin, so we might want to counter pin his bishop here so we can effectively play knight to d5. Would that run into knight d5? It might. It might. So maybe we have to play queen here instead. But would that run into this? I mean, no, because I can just take. So I think this works better than queen f3 because it doesn't allow knight to e5 with tempo, and then we can try to exploit the d5 square here. Alright, rook takes. Now we have to take back with the rook, it's forced. Good. He plays what? c6, which guards the d5 square, but we have another square. We have the e4 square. Does that run into issue with the queen pinning us? Is a question, which is a valid question. Maybe, but I can play king f1. And this also eyes this piece here. And then if he plays, well, what if he plays g6? g6 in this position, I can go, okay. I think the approach here is we're going to take, so this is going to go into an endgame, it looks like, and I think this endgame, well, let's see, do we let it go to an endgame? We can play f4, which really pushes the limits of black's defense here, because his knight basically has to move as far as I can see, and it's moving back to a place where, I mean, he can unpin himself, but then like he's losing a pawn. So we got f4, let's see, check. He can't check us because his bishop again is still pinned. Okay, good. That's a good move. But I think he's, so let's calculate. Queen takes, knight takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, and knight takes. And I think we're just in a better endgame, and I think that an endgame here is something black should not be looking forward to. So I think taking it to an endgame is the way to go. Let's see. Yeah, I think we just, because he doesn't have a pawn to win when he takes back with a knight, and we do. And then his rook doesn't have, I think this is just a superior endgame for, yeah, because knight takes d6, rook to d8, and then our knight drops back to c4, guarding the d2 square, which would be his infiltration point for his rook. So we'll go with that. And then his knight can come into g4, but we have just h3, and I don't think he has any other spots to go to that are unguarded by my pieces. And then it's very nice that, you know, this exchange happened, because now he can never attack my knight on c4. So we're just up a pawn, and I think our pieces are a little bit more active here, which is good. So that's the theme of that, was just, you know, using the initial weakness given by the pawns over here in order to, you know, exploit this. So let's see, we got rook there. So this would transition into a knight's endgame. If we take, he's probably planning to, he can take with a king. And that's pretty hard to calculate out, because king takes, knight to here, and then the king can't move to there, but he can maybe drop his knight back, and then I think we just advance our king up. So I don't know, either way this is close, but I think our advantage here is the pawns, the weak pawns. And if one of these pawns fall, I think both will eventually fall. We just have to be very careful of, you know, avenues that his knight can take to approach our pawns. So here he's attacking this pawn. I think we defend it, and he still can't find a defense for this pawn because my knight guards d7. And not to mention we're still up a pawn. We have a pawn side, or a king side pawn majority, and it's a pretty good pawn chain here. His knight would have to get all the way back to f1 to attack. Alright, so now at this point I think king activity is going to be the most important. We could also maybe plan on restricting his knight. That's a good, relatively good plan, I would say, because his knight could come in here, maybe access this square. But I think king activity is also good here, so we want to get our king into the game in the end game. We want to start marching our king up the board. So now I think we can play f4. His knight can still access this. His knight can still come down to here. So I think we can play this slowly. We could play, let's see. I don't think we should be that scared of his knight coming down, because then he drops another pawn. His knight is going to be pretty overextended. And now we can just basically march our king up the board without being even afraid of. We could also drop our knight back to hit his pawn. I mean, there's a lot of avenues of trying to attack this. I think this, using our pawn majority over here to create a pass pawn, will be the way to go. Because his king can run to this side, but there's not really much he can do. And he also, we could just fork this pawn as well. I think basically all roads lead to Rome at this point. I mean, I think it's all winning. Because his knight is just stuck like Chuck back here. Can't go anywhere. I mean, he could go back, blunder the fork. I guess it's not a blunder because his knight still guards. but we can go like can go back, and we can even go like back here. And if his knight comes in here, we just are going to work our king around here slowly. See, knight to h5. There's no repetition, is there? Knight to h5, I think we just go kinged it. I don't think we, well, let's say we go here, king there, knight takes. Knight here, knight back. We can't advance up here because his knight is still guarding. We don't want to repeat. So let's go like, let's actually retreat our king. Then we're going to just win these pawns here if the king comes up. We'll just win the pawns. And then we got that. Because his pawn ain't going nowhere. Can move knight b7, and then just run this pawn as well would be another approach. And then, so a4, and I don't think the king is going to be fast enough. The knight could be, potentially. So I don't think we want to provoke the knight into running. Could go, I mean, the king can't even like hurt our pawn chain here because our knight is just gonna take if he ever goes past that rank. So let's calculate. A5, knight here, and we guard. I think we can just go king here because this king goes to let's see. King here, king here, king here. Knight has to move. It's not the most simple thing winning endgames like this, but okay. If he sacks the knight, let's see. Here, if he just takes, and then he has to take this one because it's passed. And we play knight there with check, and we're getting over here to win. So knight there. If his knight drops here, we just take wherever his knight go, basically. We just take and guard. And then we guard our knight with our king and ensure our pawns are going to get up the board here. So it was an endgame grind, but it's not over yet. We had the advantage, though, from the start of the endgame. It looks like we're converting it pretty well here, as long as we don't make any serious miscalculations. Oh, yeah. Okay, so we got knight to b6. I think we can throw in the move a5, but that might... Yeah, I think that's overly complicated. I think we can just do knight takes c5, and then because he's attacking our knight, we're going to defend the knight here. And then there's basically no way he's going to... Yeah, you just got to make moves here. And he might be put in Zugzwang, which means like after... No, he's not. Okay. I'll just play h5. I don't think we were in a rush exactly, but it forces his knight to move basically, and we can play some like a5, and then if his knight comes back, okay, his knight did not go back, but now we can escort the a pawn up the board here, and it's much faster than whatever he's got going on in the h file. So let's see here, and he's not in time. Yeah, he's just not in time. And we'll block it off. And well, maybe we could have just found some checkmating thing, but then his king comes out here. So I'm just going to play it simple. Block off the pawn, stop him from promoting, and then we win. So it's basically GG at this point. So yeah. Old Steinitz defense. Yeah, basically it transposed to like a Rui Lopez. And since he still has his knight here, he's not going to stalemate us as long as we leave the knight on the board. So that's good to know, is that we're not going to accidentally stalemate. I don't have to worry about something like that. But, yeah, pretty easy conversion here. Our opponent might just, take his time. And that's checkmate. Alright, good game to our opponents. And let's analyze what happened this game and if we could have played it slightly more accurately. I'm sure there's times where we could have. So let's see with the engine here. Notice he was 1320, so we're kind of moving up in the ratings. That was a little bit more of a theoretical line. So let's see what we got here. We got e4, e5, d6, the Philidor defense. So I respond d4, which in a lot of cases I have seen it transpose into some sort of Rui Lopez, like a Steinitz defense, which is, I think, exactly what happened this game. So we got e takes, knight takes, bishop to d7, which is, of course, it's just a different move order. Then we got knight to c3 and knight to f6, and then we play bishop to b5, which transposes it, as you can see it changed here, to the old Steinitz defense. Because the idea is like knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, and then actually a trap here would be like if they just did like knight f6 or something, you have e5, but you're like, oh, like what is it? You just take. And then after, no, you don't take their queen. You take their pawn on e5, and then they got to move like queen e7. You just take knight takes, and he has to move his king, and then you take, and then the rook hangs at the end. So that's one of the traps there you have with the old Steinitz. But let's go into what actually went on in the game. You got a6, and then instead of dropping back with a bishop, the most accurate, the books say that you should take with a bishop. So we take with a bishop, and then he takes with a bishop as well, which isn't as good because this structure is ruined anyway, whether you take back with a bishop or the pawn at the start. The only difference is when you're taking with a bishop here is that you're giving up the bishop for the knight. And ideally, black would want to keep the bishop pair for long-term considerations here, considering that they have to ruin their structure anyway. So that's what a lot of books give. He went with, bishop takes, which is still fine. I mean, the computer would probably play this position just fine. So castles, the computer likes, bishop f4, queen d4, developing moves better. I just played it safe, castled, and then we go rook to e1, decent move. Bishop to e7 is still good. And then we execute our plan of b3, which the computer thinks is a pretty good plan. b3 in order to put our bishop on b2 here. So castle, and then bishop b2. We want to have long-term pressure, I guess, against the king side, and we're just like this. We're just inviting our opponent, continue. How are you gonna deal with the pressure here and also your weaknesses over on the queen side? So then rook to e8. I think that's good. It's like a improving move, just a general improving move. And then f4. Wow, the computer likes just going for white's or black's king side here. My only consideration with f4 would be that black still has this dark side bishop, which it's going to take him a couple moves, of course, to get it out to a useful spot. But because of that, this diagonal can still be attacked. But I guess f4, there's no concrete way to attack my king on the dark squares, and that does kind of look foreboding for black there. So yeah, that makes sense. But we went with queen to e2, just general improvement, and then rook a to d1, just more we're generally improving. We're increasing the pressure, particularly on the center, and also eyeing the weaknesses on the queen side, because if he moves his rook, he can't do something equivalent to what we did because he'd be dropping the a6 pawn there. So we got c5. I think that was significantly weakening, which the computer does as well. So we play e5. That's what the computer liked. Yeah, and other possibilities. It liked f4 again. It liked h3. But e5. And the reason why we want to break open the center is because we have so much pressure down the center. We have the rook on d1, x-raying the queen. If the pawn, takes, we just take the queen. And otherwise the knight has to move, which is what happened. The knight has to basically go somewhere. And then I pushed e6. But it doesn't even like that. It says queen to g4. Just attacking the king side. Wow. But e6, shoving the pawn basically down black's throat. We're what are you going to do about this pawn? Takes. Queen h4 I think might have been a mistake on my part because I didn't consider that the king could essentially just drop back to g8 here, to king f8. But it's not the end of the world, because it's not like he can immediately exploit this pin here. So we had queen to f5, countering this pin with my own pin, and then rook takes. I think kind of it exacerbates the problem, because after rook takes, it's like this other rook is just not as well placed as all your pieces in the center, and now all my pieces are eyeing. So it's like a contest of how much firepower can each side get towards the king, and I think white is just like slightly better here, because black's rook is still like you can't really move it until you move the queen, and like how are you going to move the queen? It's blocked by my rook here. So, and then c6, probably decisive mistake. We have knight e4 here, which we like pounced on immediately. Knight e4, because the bishop is still pinned. He can't take, or else I just take his king. So he moves knight to e5, just trying to defend here. And then, yeah, f4, just saying, you know, where are you going to go now with your knight? Yeah, and I missed that because I messed this up. I went in endgame, which is still like winning, but I guess I didn't have to go into an endgame. I could have just said king 8 or queen h7, I mean, and use this just like massive pressure on the king side to continue the king side attack. And then if king goes up there, we just exchange, and his king is like in a goofy position here and about to get checkmated. Otherwise, if his king doesn't move, like you can see, we're threatening a skewer here. So here you just take. Yeah, it's just basically, oh, it would have been just like outright over if I played queen h7. But instead, we converted in endgame, which I was pretty confident we could win anyway. So bishop takes, knight takes, knight takes. So this is basically, yeah, I was like 99% sure this endgame was winning for white, because basically like the most key thing is that we were defending d2 when we dropped back. We're not allowing his rook to get on our second rank, and these weaknesses over here on the queen side, his pawns are going to be easier than our pawns, which are pretty strong, you know, chains, or within a couple moves, you know, he's going to have a harder time defending the pawns. So we just exchanged the material, banking on the fact that those weaknesses are going to cost him. Knight to e5, centralizing our knight. You know, g3, solidifying our pawn chain, and then just king f2, just king activity. And I think at this point, like, all roads kind of led to Rome. There were like a lot of avenues in which we could have won this game, but we took it kind of laboriously, which is sometimes what you have to do in endgames. You just got to be laborious, and you got to work your way to attack pawns. The key thing here is you got to, on endgames, you focus in on attacking pawns. And, you know, he checks the king, just move to e3, to f3, to f4, to f3. And then when he moves his knight back, you have no check. And you can give up this pawn because you're winning on the queen side here. So, yeah. And then after that, he had some tricks left probably, but we managed to avoid them. We managed to avoid those complications and convert this winning endgame. And his pawn is too late to promote. Alright, so that ends my second video, and thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed.